joining us once again here on the show on this Monday spot. His Football Morning in America column on NBCSports.com and Pro Football Talk is a must-read, and he is Peter King. How are you doing, Peter?
Hey, I'm doing okay, Rich. How are you?
I'm hanging in there, thank you. Everybody happy and healthy where I am, so that's why I'm sitting here. As always, your columns must read. So you hectored Chris Ballard, the general manager of the Colts, into, I guess, allowing you to virtually follow him. I mean, how did you report what you did for the Colts and how the general manager is getting ready for this draft with Zooms and meetings and FaceTimes and all that stuff?
Well, I came up with this idea, Rich, last week that, I had no idea how these teams, I could sort of figure that they're doing meetings by video conference and all that, but I didn't really know. So I put a few lines in the water with teams, and the Colts agreed to allow me to chat. In the case of Frank Reich, it was actually by Zoom video conference, and in with others, it was simply by telephone, to sort of tell me what your week is like. Tell me what your day is like. Tell me, how are you doing your job now? So I got 6 people in the organization to tell me exactly where they're working from. One of their social media people, Amber Darrow, is working from her couch about 5 miles from the Colts complex. And their offensive quality control guy has decamped to his parents' house in northern Mississippi, where he had to make sure there was good Wi-Fi there in Corinth, Mississippi, before he went there. But in general, I just wanted to see exactly how teams were working, how they were able to continue doing their jobs. And Rich, I'll tell you one of the interesting things, at least to me. When the top 30 visits, which are vitally important to so many teams, it's how Andy Reid got to be smitten with Patrick Mahomes. He had him for a day in the Chiefs complex in Kansas City in 2017, and basically that convinced him to take Mahomes, to trade up and take him. Well, they're not going to have that this year. So how are they doing it? Well, in succession, they basically have a series of 1-hour meetings, either by Zoom or FaceTime or maybe Cisco WebEx, Microsoft Teams, whatever their video conference of choice is. And they do that, and they have a maximum of 1 hour per team employee that they can talk to this guy. And then at the end of 3 hours, they're done, and they got to make their decision. So everybody's going to say, wah, cope with it. It's just, and the Colts aren't complaining. They're simply saying, here is our new fact of life. And, Rich, I just wonder, especially Tua Tagovailoa, think about it. How is a team going to be really comfortable with picking him when their doctors and they cannot get their hands on him to do a complete and thorough physical of that hip and those 2 ankles?
So, and that front, though, didn't he have some sort of medical recheck that all team doctors were able to, I guess, chime in on?
Yes.
Okay, so that doesn't check that box, you don't think? Potentially?
I don't know, Rich. I mean, I still think that there's a lot of these teams that they want to look their own orthopedist in the face,
right, and
say, listen, we're going to pick this guy with what? The 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 9th pick in this draft. And we're going to, and first of all, we can't even get him in our own facility to sit down and talk football with him, even though I'm sure a lot of people have already done some things like that. All I'm saying is it's doable, but it's scary.
Peter King here on the Rich Eisen Show. So what's the status in terms of where all teams are going to be for the draft? Obviously, some teams are still maybe in their team facilities. I had Sean Payton on last Wednesday, and he's like, hey, man, I just strolled into work. It's our first day here at a brewery, and the Dixie Brewery in New Orleans East, and the The Bensons own it, and we're kind of setting up shop here, where anybody that's that can come to work and they're healthy enough to come to work and they're not exposed because they have pre-existing conditions, they're welcome here. Everybody else has to have their temperature checked before we walk in here. Like that's the new normal. Or is everybody just going to have to be forced to do it from home, Peter? What do you know about that right
Rich,
now?
I think at the end of the day, I think it's going to be one of two things. I think every team is either going to have to be at home or individually or at some location, not in the facility, but like that brewery where people, some number, 5, 6, 7, whatever the maximum the NFL will allow, be in a place where they can be distant from each other but still in the same room. Now, if you ask me my gut feeling today, I think it'll all be individuals working out of individual homes.
Really?
And then you're going to have to worry about, as Kevin Demoff of the Rams told me last week, the encryption technology of some of these video conference services, because obviously, Zoom has come under some scrutiny
Yep.
for not having the best security and encryption. So, look, there's all these issues. And, Rich, I'll tell you what's going on with the NFL right now. So today is April 6th. And April 6th is when all new coaches around the NFL are supposed to start their off-season program.
Mm-hmm.
And as of last night, the NFL had not distributed rules for the new coaches in their off-season program. And one person involved with one of these teams said, when I asked them this weekend about it, we have no idea what the rules are. And so, the NFL is like that dog that you see out in the middle of a lake who looks perfectly calm, but is paddling like a madman so that he doesn't go under. And that's what the NFL is trying to do right now with all these things that they never expected to be issues 3 weeks ago.
And I've got Sean McVay on at in hour number 2. I'll ask him exactly what he knows right now and what he's planning on. And
I'm sure he doesn't know anything about April 20, except just like the Colts, I'm sure he's planning
right
to basically have his offensive and defensive players separately on video conferencing so that they can learn their playbook for X number of hours in the course of a week. They're discussing with the NFLPA what the rules are and all that, but it's all just right now anyway. It's sort of mayhem.
So in terms of the rules for that too, Peter King here on the Rich Eisen Show, it would be essentially what, like a certain limited of hours that a player would have to be make himself available for this sort of stuff, as opposed to no rules that you got to be on in the same way that. Are you saying there could be Zoom holdouts, contractual Zoom holdouts, Peter? Is that is that what we're headed for right now?
Hey, Rich, if we are not allowed to get out of our houses and our apartments and our homes by the end of July, man, I'll tell you one thing. I don't think we're going to have an NFL season to worry about. That's all I can say.
Well, I'm just saying,
like more than that to worry about.
No, I'm just saying though, is that I haven't signed my tender, so I'm not zooming in. I'm holding out of the Zoom meetings.
That's a really good question. And what will Dak Prescott do in Dallas, for instance?
He refuses to Zoom.
If Mike McCarthy is installing and Kellen Moore are installing the new offense over Zoom. What are they going to do? Are they not going to have their quarterback on it? I guess as of right now, they wouldn't have their quarterback on it, but I don't know.
I guess it's a different way of, paraphrasing the old Joaquin Andujar, right? If I ain't signed, I ain't zooming, that's the way it might have to be. Remember if I ain't starting, I ain't departing. Remember that old one? Yeah. Peter King here on the Rich Eisen Show. All right, you just mentioned about, if we're not out of our homes by July, obviously we're taking the virus's cues on things. The commissioner was one of many commissioners that was on the phone with the president over the weekend. What are you hearing about the NFL's stance on all this? Are there discussions somewhere, sometime about all of those contingency plans right now, Peter?
I don't see how they can have any serious discussion right now. The only thing they can do is prepare. What I wrote in my column today, Rich, is that knowing Howard Katz and his schedule team,
Right.
these diligent guys who live it for 4 months, like Mike North and Ani Bose and all those people on their team, I would be shocked if they aren't in there right now working on 12 and 14 game versions of the schedule. That if they need to on August 1st, they can pull out of their drawer and say, okay, we're starting the NFL season on October 18th.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be 12 weeks in the regular season, no buys, and we're going to have a limited number of fans in the stands, and here's the schedule. And everybody said, well, big deal. Why don't you just lop off the first, say, 4 weeks? Well, the difficult thing with that, I would think, is you would probably want to have all of your division games played in either a 12 or 14 game compacted version of the schedule. So, the NFL isn't used to not having any division games in the first 4 weeks of a season. So they're probably going to have to go to work and see if one of those things can be done. Rich, and that's a guess on my part, but having the extra month or 3 weeks now to do the schedule,
right,
it'd be foolish for the NFL not to be considering alternatives like that.
Peter King here on the Rich Eisen Show. I saw, because I follow Rick Stroud, who covers the Bucs in Tampa. He tweeted out Jameis Winston doing a PSA with a doctor to try and raise money locally still. And it just shows you how his mindset is still focused on his own community and just being somebody who's out there in the community. And that, I can only think that's also something that he wants to show teams that I can do this for you too.
Right.
And again, I'm sure his altruism comes from every fiber of his being. That's what he has definitely shown in the last couple of years, if not maybe longer for those who know him a little bit better than me. I just bring that up too because he and Cam Newton are still sitting out there. What in the world is happening with those two guys? And we all know the spots that could use them. We don't know if they're going to do that before the draft. What can you tell me here now less than 3 weeks before the draft about those two guys?
Rich, I don't think there's any hurry for teams with these guys because now the frenetic stuff has stopped. Now that Nick Foles has gone to the Bears, Phillip Rivers has gone to the Colts, Teddy Bridgewater, Tom Brady, and I'm sure I'm missing one or two. But I think now it has become very clear that the New England Patriots might sign a veteran quarterback, but if they do, it'll be at their price tag and at their time. I think now the two biggest teams that you really wonder about as being in the market for both Cam and Jameis Winston would be the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Los Angeles Chargers. But if I am either one of those teams, I wouldn't want to sign either one of those quarterbacks until after this draft. And I mean, somebody asked me that this week. The other day? What do you think is going to happen to those guys? And here's the only reason I say that. Let's say that Dave Caldwell and Doug Marrone of the Jacksonville Jaguars really like Justin Herbert, okay? And on draft day, Justin Herbert pulls an Aaron Rodgers. And there, the Jacksonville Jaguars sitting there with the 20th pick in the first round, the pick acquired, in the trade for Jalen Ramsey with the Los Angeles Rams. At number 20, what if Justin Herbert's sitting there? And what if they love him? And what if they say, geez, man, I wish we didn't sign Jameis Winston. Now we'd rather have Justin Herbert to draft and develop. So it doesn't make any sense for me, in my mind. Similarly, if the Chargers are sitting there at 37 or even at 6, really, with Herbert, or at 37 with, say, Jordan Love or Fromm or Eisen, or maybe they love one of those guys. How do we know? And he's sitting there at 37, and they can pick their guy of the long-term future. So that's why I'm not saying I absolutely don't think it'll happen, but my expectation is that both of those guys will probably find a home sometime in the spring. And to me, Cam Newton, I would think he'd find a home sometime after a team could have its own doctors examining him and finding out exactly how his foot is and how his shoulder is.
No, well, that's not going to be for some time, though. I mean, you're talking maybe,
right.
Potentially the summer for something like that, based on everything we read in headlines.
Right. I agree, but Rich, as you can see, we can see which way the wind is blowing on all of this stuff. Okay, and in my opinion, I mean, I doubt that any team is going to have any sort of mini camp at all this year. Okay,
right,
and they will be fortunate to have any kind of training camp, I think. And if all that is the case, and I mean, I just this is a tangible thing. It's not like they're being forced to make a decision tomorrow on Tua Tagovailoa. They're not being forced to do that because Tua Tagovailoa, your decision has to be made by April 23rd,
right?
Or else somebody else will take him. It's not that way with Cam Newton.
But then let's just play this whole thing out. If that happens, then the competition, that's the healthy competition, as it was termed by the Bears last week, between Foles and Trubisky won't play out before the Bears make a decision on Trubisky's fifth-year option, right? So how does that all play out?
There's no way that they can. There's no way that they can exercise that option. How possibly could there's nothing that they would see in a mini camp.
Right.
Nothing. I heard Ryan Pace and those guys talk about that last week. They're not going to know whether they're bringing Trubisky back by whatever the date is this spring. They've got to. They're not going to exercise that. I would be shocked.
Well, is that the sort of is that the sort of stuff that is being discussed between the PA and the NFL right now about what the rules are in the like? Could they relax those rules?
I don't know, Rich. I've done zero reporting on that, so I just don't know.
Just don't know. All right, ask Peter the poll question before we let him hit the road. About the draft, Christopher. Go for it.
Yeah, Peter. Which virtual draft room would you most want to peek inside? Cowboys, Patriots, Dolphins, and we threw the Giants on there.
Dolphins, without any question. 3 picks in the first round, very likely to get their long-term quarterback. And in my opinion, if Burrow is markedly above the other quarterbacks on their board, they should offer 4-1s to the Bengals to move up from 5-1.
Say that. Did the phone didn't break up? I heard you, but say that again. 4-1s, like for Burrow? Is that really what you think?
If I'm saying, if on the Dolphins draft board, Joe Burrow is number 1, and the other quarterbacks, whoever's number 2, Herbert, Tua, whoever it is, if there is a significant drop-off between 1 and 2 on their quarterback board, then I would trade 5, 18, 26, and one of their 2 first-round picks next year to the Bengals for Joe Burrow.
Boy, I'd want to zoom into that draft room too. Wow, that is something else. Boy, that would literally blow.
Maybe, hey, Rich.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why I'm not a general manager in the NFL.
Hey, if I see a wedding photo of you and Ricky Williams on the cover of a magazine after all this, then I'll know that this was your idea. I'll know that. Oh man, I remember that. Remember that Ditka and Ricky Williams photograph on the cover of ESPN the magazine?
Yeah.
My gosh, Peter, you take care of yourself. Let's chat next week. Okay. Thanks again.
Okay, good. See you later, Rich. Bye.
Lots to unpack there from Peter King.